Hello, everybody. I hope you're all having an amazing day. We're doing something a bit different for today's Wednesday episode. If you know me, if you've been around the channel for a bit, you know that I'm a big fan of puzzles. I'm a big fan of tactics. I think it's one of the most fun parts about the game. And as part of my training, I try to do pretty regular tactics and things. We do our Puzzle Rush Sundays, which you might know. But anyway, for the last few months, I've been sort of keeping an eye out for particularly nice, particularly hard puzzles, so that I can share them with you guys. So today I've just collected 5 of some of my favourite puzzles that I've encountered throughout the last few months, and I'm just gonna go ahead and walk through the solving process, give you a chance to solve them yourselves. So let's hop in with the first little puzzle. So this one on the screen right now, this was composed by a player called William Greery. And I believe this was made in 1900. I could be wrong with that one. But it's white to move. And all of these, I should say as well, are mate in 2s. And the reason I like mate in 2s, I think they are potentially the most creative. I think they're also the most challenging as well. One of the reasons for that is because a lot of the time there's mate in 3s like sneaked into the lines that you've got to watch out for. And obviously a mate in 3 is not a mate in 2, so that wouldn't class as a solution. So you've got to be very precise with these ones. They're very tricky. It's white to move here. Mate in 2. Pause the video. Try figure it out for yourself. It's very tough. It is very tough, but also not impossible. So give it a pause. I'll give you a second, and then we'll walk through the solving process. So, I hope you all found that. It's very nice if you did. You should be proud of yourself. So, if you take a look at this problem, how are you going to make? The problem is, you can't do anything with these rooks without one of them hanging. You know, these rooks are protecting each other, which means the king can take if either of them moves off of this third rank. So that's a big problem. You might also see some rook d4, rook e3 ideas protected by the knight. And you might notice that this knight is also covering e5. So if anything goes to e5, we always have the idea of knight c5 mate. Not knight f6 because that's covered twice by these 2 pawns. So, what's the answer? What is the answer? Well, the answer is actually rook f2. Now, I said you can't move the rooks because you're allowing the king to take the other one. But we actually want the king to take this d rook. We don't want the king to take this f rook because then the king's going to be too far away from the rest of our pieces. So we let the rook take the d3 rook, and after the king takes, you have knight to c5 mate. So what we've done there, we've distracted the king away from the e5 square, so this knight's freed up, and then can go to c5 and cover both of these 2 squares here. The rook's covering this knight, and this other knight's covering these 2 squares. So with the king as well, it's pretty boxed in. So you might be thinking, what if they don't take the rook? And you're exactly right thinking that. So e6 is a potential move, at which point we said before the ideas of rook d4, rook e3 are coming in vital here. So rook d4 here is just mate. If they go e5, you can see again it's all about the c5 square. The knight no longer has to be there because the king's blocked in by their own pawn. You can just go knight c5 check. Then there is also the line of queen takes d5. Is very interesting. Now you no longer have d4. However, you still do have rook to e3. So just by dropping the rook down 1 square, you're able to free up all of these ideas that just work together very nicely and sort of box in the king. I don't think this is impossible to solve. I think it's doable. It took me a very, very, very long time to do it. But once you get the logic down of basically, as soon as you say this takes his mate I think you've found it. Because everything else sort of works out. You know, they have limited other moves, which just allow the mate that you wanted in the first place. So anyway, that is a nice mating too, composed by William Greery again. I'm just going to keep saying the names. I think it's really cool that we know the names, you know, and all credit to these people because they design amazing puzzles that make chess more interesting for the rest of us. Anyway, on to the next one. So the next puzzle we have is another mating 2 from a player called Beatzuga. This was composed in the year 2000, and again, white to mate in 2. I'll give you all a second to figure it out for yourselves. So I hope you all managed to find that. I'll go ahead and straight away say the answer is rook to d3. Now, what is rook to d3 doing? So we'll go over the ideas first of what we're looking for. And if you take a very close look at this, there is a few key things we can figure out. So you have the bishop pair. Now, the bishop pair is extremely strong in this situation. And this light squared bishop especially can cover potentially this d5 square if both the knight and the bishop move out the way. What else is there? This knight is hanging. So you've got queen takes a6. The problem with that is that once you move this queen, you lose out on the control of the b3 square, allowing the king to go to b3. You might also consider this d3 square a hole because it's very well guarded. And if you ever move the rook, then the king's going to be able to walk straight in. So we have 2 holes here, and we have some bishops that are doing a lot, could potentially be doing more. So by playing rook to d3, not that one, by playing rook to d3, you're covering actually both of these holes, which is very, very clever. So let's just quickly have a look at king takes, because that's the most obvious move. At which point, again, we get our bishop in the game with a beautiful bishop to f1 mate. These bishops are doing amazing work. This pawn's covering this c3 square. The queen's covering this c2 square. And this knight is doing an amazing job of covering d2 as well. So that is a beautiful mate. 3 diagonal pieces and... well, I guess 4. You can count the pawn as a diagonal piece. And then this knight covering this little vital last d2 square. So there are way, way more options, though. So we'll have to take a look at them. Firstly, knight takes or bishop takes. It's the same result. It is the same result. Both knight d2 checkmate. So knight takes, knight d2. Again, this bishop's freed up. The rook is now looking at this pawn because the knight's moved. The queen's doing all this good stuff. And it's just sort of like it's smothered, mate. And if the bishop takes, we can see again, this bishop has now come to life, covering this d5 square. So knight d2 works once more. Not without the rook having to cover d5. With exactly the same ideas of everything being covered. Little smothered mate. There are some other things they can do as well. Firstly, let's have a look at... Bishop takes d5 is a valid shout, I guess. But now you see the power of covering up these 2 holes here with the rook. And we can just go ahead and take this knight here. The queen is covering this rook. And this is almost like a little sort of dovetail mate, I guess. One of my personal favorites. Just very tidy, very clean. And then the other very interesting line is rook to d6. So you're covering this a6 line, at which point you notice something else that rook to d6 has done. You've blocked your bishop from defending this knight. So you can just go ahead with knight takes f5, and the knight is also covering your d3 rook. So again, the bishops, the queen, the pawn, everything's doing everything, and the knight has come in with a nice smothered mate. I think this is a beautiful little puzzle. Again, very hard to do, but not impossible. Once you understand the underlying ideas of the position, you understand how strong these bishops are, you understand the need to control the b3 square as well. Very nice, very cool. Little distraction, I think distraction, sacrifice, attraction, I'm not sure. With the nice little ideas of queen takes a6 thrown in there as well. So, Beatzuga. I think he's done a lot more puzzles as well. I'll have to double check that. But from what I can tell, very, very, very good player. Quite famous as well. So, thank you, Beat Zuga. On to the next one. So, this is one of my personal favourites of this list today. Again, Mating 2. This was composed by Jacob Togstad, I think. Togstad, yeah. Made in 1911, so quite an old one here. Again, white to Mating 2. I'll give you all a second to figure it out. Cool, so we'll go ahead and reveal the move. We have Rook to E2. What? That's absolutely wild. One of my personal favourite moves, potentially ever. So what's it doing? Firstly, let's have a look at the position, as we always do. We can see this king is almost completely boxed in. This bishop's covering the rook's covering all these squares, combined with the queen and the bishop covering these two squares. So the king's completely boxed in, which is absolutely great for us. All we need to do is give them a check, and it's going to be made. Perfect. So, what else do we see? These knights are on the edge of the board, yes. However, both of them can move to two different places. That's both going to be made. It can move to here, and this one can move to here and here. And both of these, all these are check on the king, which would be mate if we can get it in. So, black has a lot of threats to defend. Luckily, this knight's covering this square. The queen's covering this square. What else have we got? This knight's covering the G square, and the queen's also covering this square. So these knights are covering both of these checks here, and the queen's covering both of these checks here. Now, potentially now you can see why Rook E2 is the move. Basically, this queen's overloaded. It can't cover both of these two checks. So Rook E2, what are you doing? You're blocking the queen from covering this G4 square. This rook also, it's important to mention, can't go here because it's pinned by this rook. So this just works, you know, it's quite nice. It looks like it shouldn't, but it just does. And the problem is, if queen takes E2, again, because the queen was overloaded, it's no longer covering this D7 check, which is just going to be made. So, what happens if the rook takes? Again, you're blocking off your queen. So you just have rook G6, apparently, is actually the mate. It's no longer knight G4 because A, you're in check, and B, you're no longer covering the E4 square. So it's very nice we have this discovered check here. The rook can go ahead and block the check, discovering the bishop attack, which is going to be mate. The rook's still covering these, the knight's covering this, and the queen, because this rook has moved down, is now covering all of this row, with the bishop covering this square as well. So that's a nice little checkmate. And that's what happens when the queen does something. The rook can take. What else have we got? Bishop D3, I guess, is a good choice. Again, though, you're blocking off your queen from this diagonal. You're also still not covering this diagonal, so knight G4 would also be mate. What else we got? Rook C4, good try, trying to block the queen from covering this D4 square. But rook to F5 now works. Because the queen is now covering this D6 square. That is why. So what have we got? What was it? Rook C4. Yeah, the queen's now covering this D6 square, and the rook, when it goes to F5, is now covering these. So the bishop, the knight, everything's nicely covered. What else have we got? Knight to F5, also a good try, but then knight G6. This knight was doing an amazing job covering G6, so it's just open now. And queen G1, also a decent try, but then again, you're no longer covering knight D7. So that's why this works, because of the pin, because the queen's overloaded covering these two squares, because these knights can't move, because the rook's sort of blocking the queen from covering D6 as well. I think this is a beautiful, beautiful puzzle. I actually think I got this relatively quick, which might be one of the reasons I like it. But yeah, it's such a counterintuitive move. Quote unquote sacrificing the rook just to free up spaces. Again, distracting the black's pieces from covering the vital squares. And once you understand these vital squares and where they are, it's relatively easy to solve, but actually getting to that point is the hard bit. So thank you, Jacob Tosgad, for an amazing puzzle. On to the next one. So what do we have here? It's puzzle number 4. Again, a white to mate in 2. This one was created by Douglas Fawcett in 1876, so a very, very old puzzle. I'll give you all a second to have a look at it, try solve it yourselves. 1, 2, that was 2 seconds. Anyway, on to the move. Straight away, I'll tell you right now, it is rook to f7. Absolutely stunning move. Absolutely beautiful. And again, like usual, I'll tell you the ideas behind it. Once more, we can see that this king is completely boxed in. So all we need to do, again, we know this, land a single check. Then it's going to be made. What is f7 doing? Again, we can sort of see that black's pieces are a bit overloaded. You know, they're doing too much. This rook needs to be here to stop rook d to e6 check, so it can't go anywhere on the 7th. And if it goes upwards, and you've got queen takes. If it goes downwards, again, rook takes. So this rook's completely stuck here. The bishop, what's the bishop doing? The queen wants to get this knight on h8 with check. And once the bishop takes, we can actually run this through. Once the bishop takes, the queen just takes. And you're blocking in your rook from covering the g7 square. Very, very nice. If the knight takes, then the knight's no longer covering this g6 square, which it was doing an amazing job doing. So it's just knight to g6. What else do we have? Rook takes f7. We have just rook e6. You know, we said the rook can't move because of rook e6. It's covering all of these. The bishop's covering this. The king's blocking off this side completely. And this pawn's covering f4. So that's pretty clean cut. So those are the main replies. Then you've got some other moves. They can do a c2 or a c takes d2. Both of these, the same result. Queen a1, again, looking at the whole board for these diagonals. Cutting off black's pieces. Really nice. b4 is another option. After rook f7, b4. And again, you just saw... Now you're no longer covering c4, so you can just go ahead and play knight c4 mate. And then knight e2, basically any knight move. Again, rook f5, the knight was doing an amazing job covering f5. So again, this is just a bit of a zugzwang. If you don't know what a zugzwang is, by the way, it basically means there's no good moves. Any move you make is going to be losing. Just blocking off the pieces, attracting, distracting, whatever you want to call it. And noticing black's pieces are overloaded. Again, black's king's completely boxed in. You've got to understand what the pieces are covering, understand that they are overloaded, and try find the threats. Again, looks hard. Once you understand the deeper position and understand what every piece is doing in the position, it's going to be quite easy, but still a very, very beautiful little puzzle. Thank you, Douglas Fawcett. On to the next one. What have we got here? This is an absolute travesty on the chessboard, and this is probably the reason why you clicked the video, to be honest. This is a mate in 2 puzzle, again, composed by Anatoly Matsukevich in, what year? 1979. So, not too old. And yeah, this is absolutely ridiculous. I don't think I managed to get this on my own. There's just too much going on for me. I like more simple stuff, but I can't not throw this in the mix. Again, white to mate in 2. Try figure it out for yourself. I'll be very impressed if you do. Not that hard, I will say, but just there's so many things going on. It just makes it artificially hard, I guess. Have a go at it. Pause the video. Try find it for yourself. I'll give you a second. So, what is the answer here? Once you see it, it's pretty obvious. Rook to g4. So, how do you go about finding rook to g4? So, it's very hard. Because there are so many things. First, it's important to know black has no checks on the white king. Somehow black has no checks. The only real checking square is going to be c6 and b7. Both of these, so c6 by the queen, b7 by the bishop, Both of these are covered by this knight on d8, which would incidentally be checkmate on the Black King as well. So we have those. What else? These two knights here are both pinned by the rook and the queen. Very important to know. And yeah, that's basically it. So, it's also, I think, important to know, no direct checks work. So you can check as much as you want, but everything's sort of covered. There are just so many knights on the board, everything's covered. You mostly only have light squared bishops as well, I think is important. You only have two pieces, the queen and the bishop, that can check on dark squares. The knight checks don't work, they're all quite well covered. So yeah, that's important to know, I think, as well. So, what's your only other piece? Your only other piece is this rook. Now, checking straight away doesn't work because they can just take either way. So how do you add another piece into the attack? You can, yeah, so we know checking doesn't work, so you need to add another piece into the attack. So you can go rook g6, but again, they just take. So your only option really left is rook to g4. Now, what's rook to g4 doing? It's adding another piece into the attack. I should say as well, you can add another piece into the attack another way by bishop to c2. But there are several ways they can get around this. A, knight takes is an option. B, knight to c3 both covers this and frees up the rook attacking the queen. So that doesn't work. That's basically the only other thing you can do. So we're left with rook to g4. Now, what is rook to g4 doing? It's actually threatening two different types of mate. Now, they're very similar to each other. You have queen takes a4 and queen takes b4. Both are going to be checkmate. There's no knight takes b4 because the knight's pinned to the king. Again, very important to know. So you're making two threats. Now, it's possible to stop one of these, but not both of them. So they can try by going like knight c3, but then because you have another threat, queen b4 is just mate. They can go queen f4, I think, is a very good try as well. Trying to sort of just blockade, trying to make it potentially like a mate in 3. But then knight to c6, the queen's no longer covering this c6 square, so you can just hop in with the knight. And that's about it. Yeah, rook b1, if they try to do anything else, you just take the knight. This knight's covering the escape square, and the queen's covering all of these perfectly. So, I mean, it's pretty simple. It's wild to look at, and I think that's the problem behind this one. Once you understand the deeper position, understand that they have no checks against you, you have no checks against them. So you just need to develop a piece, basically. It's like opening theory almost. You need to just develop your pieces and create threats. So yeah, absolutely wild. Anatoly Matsukovich, what a legend. For making something as crazy as this, he must have been some sort of genius. I'm not sure. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this video. Let us know if you want more. I love doing puzzles, so I'm happy to do anything relating to puzzles. I hope I explained them well. If you have any questions in the comments, just go, yeah, leave a comment, I guess. And yeah, thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. Please like if you liked. Please subscribe if you really liked. And I'll catch you guys all tomorrow. Bye-bye.